Thank you, Rebecca.
So first thing is announcements, open session, and public comments. Do we have any public comments or announcements? Okay, we'll move on to administrative, starting with roll call. So we have myself, we have Joe, we have Kevin, we have Kurt, we have Will, and that seems to be everybody. So take a few minutes to review the minutes of meeting from the October 18th meeting, and then at the appropriate time, we can entertain a motion to accept.
I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes on October 18th.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Second.
Second.
That was a second.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. To the
Chris,
vote.
Chris, I think we have Alfred on. Alfred, are you on? Alfred?
Yeah, I'm seeing a phone icon. We'll give him a minute to just to Alfred, can you hear us? Alfred, are you there?
This is Skip. I'm there.
Oh, Skip, okay. You're on by phone, huh?
Correct.
Okay. Skip, we just took a look at the minutes of meeting. Kevin made a motion to approve. Kurt seconded it, and we're just getting ready for the vote. So we'll go through that, starting with Kurt
Aye.
and Kevin.
Aye.
Skip,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
and Chris. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is the status of our 2021 dredging and any dredging concerns. So I'll give a brief summary, and then if we have other discussion, we can move into it. Through the weekend, there have been a total of 40 scows filled and transported. 22 of them have been by Burnham and 18 by AGM. And that does not count another 2 that are loaded now and in transit, and maybe even a third. So we're hovering right around through today, probably about 43 scows. Tomorrow, GEI is going to be out and do a survey so that we can quantify the actual work to date. And on Thursday, Burnham will be back to do a survey in support of their monthly invoice. So this week we'll get 2 good data sets, which will really quantify how many yards have been dredged. Any questions?
Just a comment. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we're particularly anxious to be able to convert the yards to date, just convert it to an average per scow, so that going forward we have a better feel for quantity. But it is good for those who have seen it in person. They're around the back side of the pier, you know, and have entered into the north access channel. So they've completed the anchorage area and the L pier. And I'd say most, maybe not all of the south access channel. And as I said, they have already moved in and are making headway in the north access channel.
So I do have one question, Chris, and this relates to the northernmost limit of the dredging. So there's an awful lot of mulch that was placed on the north beach, essentially in front of the condominiums there.
Right.
And I don't know what the actual limit is in terms of where they're going to go, but the reason I just wanted to raise it is, you know, not for any other reason, but there's a point where they're going to start to encounter a substantial amount of shell material, and some, you know, some oysters, some dead, some live. But we probably put over the period of 4 years or so between 2011 and 2015, probably like 300 tons of mulch material there. So just if for no other value than to point that out to them, I don't think it'll make a difference to them. I know that there's no way we could ever try to recover that or whatever, but just as an FYI.
Yeah, we can mention it to them. I think given cults versus the size of their bucket, I think they'll be comfortable.
You know, I if there was a way to recover, it'd be great, but I don't think there's anything we can do.
Yeah, no, not at this stage. Okay, move on to an update on permit activity, Joe.
Yeah, nothing major to report. The Congress is on vacation. One thing we learned that the Assistant Secretary of the Army, who oversees the Army Corps of Engineers, that person finally has been appointed. And the goal of our congressional delegation is to talk with that guy, that person, and to see if he can influence the Army Corps to think along our way about doing the permit for Area 2. So I think by the next time we meet, we should have some news on how that is going. I think it's positive that the Army Corps has not made a definitive decision yet, and it is still an open case under review for them, with them.
Yeah, that is encouraging. And I assume everyone's been tied up in DC. Probably hard for them to focus on anything but the most recent issues. So I look forward to some progress. Anything else on permits? Any questions from anyone? Okay, the next item is actually a new item from previous agendas. I had mentioned on the last call that it's time for us to start thinking about maintenance, dredging, minimizing future sedimentation, et cetera. So I kind of see it as we should focus on two categories. One is maybe to get to the point where we could do some hydraulic dredging, and that would require methods and locations to do the dewatering. So I suggest we put that on the list and we flesh out some plans, either what we can do or what the impediments are so we can solve. And then the other category would be mitigating actions to minimize sediment buildup. And this would be some of the situations for improving intertidal flow. So we can have a little discussion about it now if anyone has specific ideas. Before the next meeting, I can circulate a list along the lines of what I just described, but also any ideas that we want to put on the list as of tonight's call. So let's open it up for discussions and recommendations as to what we should put on the list for consideration.
So a couple of thoughts there, Chris. if I might, I have had, I don't know if Becky's still on the call, but we have had a couple of conversations with Jay and DPW with regard to moving forward on Jay Norton with regard to the what they call the Mayo Creek project, which was approved by town meeting. Part of that project, the reason it affects dredging is part of the project involves probably rebuilding the road, but also putting in a self-regulating tide gate over Mayo Creek, which would allow for tidal exchange. Right now, with the way the duck bill is configured, that just becomes a dead water area. So this is the north side of, the north side of the pier, the area where we just have incredible amounts of muck buildup. So the big advantage to a self-regulating tide gate is that's going to allow, in particular, flow out, which we currently don't have right now. What happens is on an incoming tide, pretty much everything backs up into that basin. And, as most everybody probably on the call is aware, that's when sediments precipitate out of the water and deposit. So something that's going to allow tidal exchange that allows water to flow upstream should allow material to start migrating upstream onto the marsh. And of course, that may be an area where, I know John Portnoy and John Reel have talked about, hydraulic dredging and potentially pumping material either into Mayo Creek or, up into the Herring River as part of that restoration. But that's just one thing that's on the table. I'm a little bit sanguine about how much we'll be able to do with hydraulic dredging because it's a pretty significant undertaking from an equipment standpoint. We've not done it in Wellfleet, and in order to deposit the materials on these marshes is a whole permitting process unto itself, not unlike what Joe's going through just to get the Area 2 permits. So that's going to be a challenge. But the self-regulating tide gate, that permitting should go forward fairly easily, but it is at least one measure that is in process.
But even that would be subject to a permit process, correct?
Oh, it is. It is.
Yeah.
The difference is it's much more of a common kind of a request. There's already a duck bill. There's already a culvert there. There's already, there's already an opening. So you're talking about getting the permit to reconstruct as opposed to something else.
Yeah.
And the self-regulating tide gates have been approved widely throughout the Commonwealth. It's one of the more preferred approaches here. So it's not like we're going to run into regulatory, constraints or challenges because it's something new or different.
Yeah. Now, along the same lines, is there any opportunity vis-a-vis Duck Creek?
Well, Duck Creek, what could happen there, which is it's not currently part of the Clean Water Advisory, like nitrogen mitigation plan, but something that has been talked about would be to remove the old railroad causeway or what's left of it, which would increase tidal exchange going up, up into Duck Creek, which would allow sediment migration further up into the Duck Creek network. And then the other piece of that is installing another self-regulating tide gate at Howes Pond, which is there's actually a culvert underneath Main Street, pretty much in front of the Piping Plover, right down, on the bay side. There's a culvert down there, and there's like about a 300-foot channel that goes up into a marsh behind the Piping Plover, which had historically been a significant eel and turtle nesting habitat. So right now the culvert has been restricted, so it's really only one way. It's inhibiting the natural migration of of fish, eels, turtles, etc. up, and the marsh behind there is dying because it's now constrained to be fresh water. So that would actually be could cause additional sedimentation problems, in the Duck Creek area just from having that stuff not be a normal salt marsh condition.
If
So
I
that's something-
remember correctly, if we proceed with the Route 6 intersection, as proposed by DOT, I'm thinking that work would include the self-regulating tide gate at Hawes Pond.
We're trying to, yes, the answer is yes. We're trying to accelerate it. The Conservation Commission was very concerned about this because basically the marsh is dying behind there. And if it can be moved up in some way, like ASAP, Conservation Commission would like to see it get moved up. And not necessarily in a sequence, tied to the main, because the Route 6 Main Street could be, I mean, the construction timetable is somewhat flexible or variable. And they're concerned about the health of that marsh.
Okay.
And, at the end of the day, these projects are the nexus with dredging is that all of these projects that reduce nutrient inflows that help reduce nutrients, lessen the amount of phytoplankton that gets generated in the water column that ultimately turns into material that we have to then remove because it's decayed and it's died and it becomes the sediments that clog the inner harbor system. So the nexus there is really that nutrient does have a big impact on what we've got to ultimately remove from there. And the third nexus is trying to find a way to see if we can increase oyster populations, especially along the whole entire pier, from probably the harbor masters, well, basically from the, basically from the harbor masters location out east around the point and around the whole inner area of the north channel and the north mooring area to probably the tip of the point there. To the extent that we could do that or increase it, it would again have a significant impact not only on nutrient reduction, but oysters actually consume the phytoplankton and they consume other particulate matter and other vegetable matter in the water column. They play a very, very big role in reducing the sediments. So that's just kind of a quick outline of at least what I know relative to what we can do from a, from a mitigation standpoint, from natural changes and enhancements to the area, flow-wise and otherwise. And then the last one would be, to what extent we can, find other types of equipment or engage Barnstable County to do, much more limited maintenance of the dredged areas so that it doesn't become a very large project, by waiting so long.
Speaking about the Barnstable Harbor dredge, the Barnstable County dredge, again, the breakwater at the beginning of the harbor needs to be done. That's, as I've said numerous times, the opening to the channel is very narrow on a low tide or minus tide. That's all clear sand that can be pumped up on the beach and used for beach replenishment, either down on Burton Baker, up to Burton Baker or down along Indian Neck on the inside. But that to me is probably the most important maintenance project of the harbor because it's eliminating the flow going out on low tide because you got that big sandbar that's actually out into the channel.
Yeah, I think Will's actually taken a look at that since our last call. Will, any additional information or thoughts moving forward?
Yeah, I think that that would be good to have that surveyed to be able to proceed in that as soon as possible to find out actually where the limits are of that sandbar and the jurisdictional areas that it could be in. So that way we could proceed on that rather quickly. And plus the county dredge would like to add on some smaller projects like that into their next few years outlook as well. So
Does that, probably Will or Kevin, you wouldn't know, but I'm assuming you're right, Kevin, that the grain size is perfect for renourishment. And I don't know what we need for permits on that. I know that historically, both material that was taken from in front of Max, by the L pier,
Yeah.
they did allow that to be put up, onto, onto Burton Baker, and then I think even further up. I don't know if
Sally's, it goes up to the cottages there.
yeah, Seashells I know is very interesting because they pay for material. So,
Right.
so
And actually on that whole issue, that all those groins actually at some point in time, I know that doesn't have anything to do with us, should be dug out. If the inside on Max was dropped quite a bit, the other side I mean, that's why you get that sand blowing over. One year, 3-4 years ago, I took a couple wheelbarrows of sand out of my boat that just blew straight off. So, I mean, if they cut them down, those groins act as catches for the sand as it flows. And I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe that's an open permit through Hillary.
Yeah, Hillary's working on the permit for that and crossing all the T's on what we can do. And under the pier is kind of a separate little permit that we have that we just, keep reapplying to reopen every year.
Right.
She's,
I guess the question is, the open permit that we use for under the pier, and we haul it up to Keller's Corner and maybe Powers, does that permit allow, or could it be expanded to include similar work out at the Breakwater, the very location that Kevin's talking about? So I guess maybe that's a question for Hillary as to whether the existing permit covers it, could cover it, or could be expanded to cover it.
The only issue that comes up in my way of thinking, and we've chatted about it in the Marina Advisory, is now we have grants set along that Breakwater, which they weren't, back when the Breakwater was put in, there were no grants in there. And the grants that are in there are gonna have an issue if we make them all of a sudden deep water grants.
Yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to picture the sand that you've referenced previously versus the location of that sand versus grants. You're saying they cohabitate at this point?
Pretty much so. I mean, there's a lot of people in town that can remember diving off that jetty on the inside, being over your head at low tide. And now you can't do it. I mean, it's all filled in. All along the inside of the jetty. There's some grants up in there, and there's grants almost to the tip of it.
which I think, to Kevin's point, I think, Chris, it begs the bigger question, which is, what kind of a sustainable, dredging plan can we have for the, should we be looking at for the inner harbor that would include some of these naturally filling features, and whether that could be put under a, what the permit cycle looks like. Can we do, is it annual Chapter 91 permits? Is it an annual 3-year plan? Is it a 5-year plan? Is it a 10-year plan? Or what kind of long-term? I mean, that's obviously the agenda item, but I think there's a bunch of unknowns there in terms of how the permitting cycle works. And maybe it would make sense to have Hillary talk to us a little bit about that.
Again, it's just troubling that the town spends all this money to have the dredging done. They dredge the federal channel, and it's just this narrow, on low tide, it's just this narrow channel, very narrow channel, with the dog leg that Will's pointed out to me, that I'll be damned if I can find it. I know I'm precipitating. I hit bottom twice going out there this year.
Sounds to me you did find the dog leg.
No, I was looking for the dog leg because that's deep water, but yeah, it truly is befuddling.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you have a sandbar that's out almost to the edge of the can. So you only have a channel that's probably 30 feet wide. And if you have two boats coming out, I've had to back way off and let the people come out because that's what you do.
Yeah, so I think going forward, unless someone objects, we can add this as an agenda item so that we keep it out in front of us to make some progress on. Okay,
Yeah,
back to the actual category, although this somewhat falls into it. Does anyone have any other thoughts on this list for future either mitigation or alternate dredging? Again, we got a lot of good ideas from before and certainly from Kurt tonight. I'll do a draft list, and when you get that list, maybe it will inspire some additional things. But does anyone have anything else they want to share tonight, which will make Rev A of the list? Okay. Any other business? Move on to scheduling the next meeting. Monday, December 6th.
Works for me.
It
That
just
work for
seems so,
everyone?
it seems so far away, Chris, but I guess we're there.
Yeah, wait till I start changing the year. Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, so it sounds like it'll work for everyone, huh? December 6th?
Yep.
Okay, that brings us to a motion to adjourn.
If you're up.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I did, so moved.
Kurt did, okay, in a second.
I'll second.
Joe? Move to the vote. Kurt?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Skip?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
And Chris, aye. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Night all.
Efficient
See
meeting,
y'all.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.